Okay, here we go. And slate. Good afternoon or evening, SIC paddling community. Welcome to another edition of SIC Talk Stories, Brews, and Boards. My name is Casi Rynkowski, and I'm the SIC Athlete Team Manager and Social Media Coordinator, and I am your host for this evening. If this is the first time you're joining us, SIC Talk Stories is a weekly series hosted by athletes, ambassadors, SIC team members alike, sharing stories, experiences, and expertise, hopefully that you'll get something from or learn something from, maybe even help you buy a board. The name SIC Talk Story is a Hawaiian term, which means to sit around and casually gab, hang out, share stories, basically what we're going to do this evening. So welcome. I am very excited today because I have a group of great gentlemen joining me, and we are going to be talking story about youth paddling. Joining me, I have Mike Eisert, coach and founder of the Paddle Academy. Mike is joining us from Dana Point. Hello, awesome. Also joining us is Ben Moore, coming from Richmond, Virginia, and Ben is involved in a high school whitewater paddling program in Richmond. Hi, Ben. Thank you. Lastly, Anthony Scaturro, Global Brand Manager and my boss, is joining us this evening out in California as well. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us too.
Bam.
Thank you.
Big crew here. So this is the first time we've hosted Talk Story with four of us and interviewing, so this should be fun. Now for the most important thing, we're talking beers. This is Brews and Boards. Everybody has a beer of their choice with them. I'm not a beer drinker, but I'm indulging tonight. Oops, my green screen is kind of screwing this up. But I have here New England Pale Ale, Suborbital. I chose it only because I like the can. What do you guys got?
What's the molecular structure or the specific density or whatever they call it of that beer?
I know, right? What do you guys got over there?
Straight up Pacifico, right here, influenced by the Mexican food that I always eat. So it's always tacos and cervezas for me.
Nice.
IPAs.
Kona, Hawaiian, longboard, lager.
Yeah, bro.
Big bag. So on the next one, it's probably going to be a pale ale. So.
Hey, I'm repping Richmond. This is Ardent. It's one of our local breweries right here in town, a couple blocks from here. It is double dry hop, so I'm going the IPA route real hard.
Nice.
You have to do that pump like that, and you probably get 2 cases sitting on your doorstep tomorrow for that.
But I'm looking forward.
Well, cheers, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us.
Cheers, ladies.
Cheers. Awesome. Well, let's kind of jump right in and get right to it. So just want to give a little background about each of you guys. Mike, you have a long history of paddling, starting out with outrigger canoe and rowing. And your collegiate rowing, I believe, was a thing that sparked your competitive ambition in water sports. Tell us how that kind of led you to paddleboarding.
Yes. And by the way, happy Memorial Weekend, guys.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Yeah, so the whole aspect of going through the college rowing program was really cool. I grew up in Newport Beach, and we had a couple really super solid rowing programs there. And then in connection with that, there were some people I knew that were really influential in the paddling community that were tied to the rowing program that I got to meet through the rowing program. And so it was really cool. In the off seasons for rowing, which typically is the summer months in Southern California, by the time we got into May, we started hopping in the canoes. And a friend of mine, Billy Whitford, would drag us over to this canoe club called Offshore. And we'd go out and we'd paddle canoes all summer long, just in a pair of shorts out in the ocean and just having fun. So that's the rowing thing kind of segued into the canoe thing in the summertime. And that's how it kind of all got going for me. besides that, I've been surfing my entire life, so I've been in the water in that area, since I was a little grom. And so love the water, love the ocean. Rowing was fantastic because it instilled discipline and everything that you needed in competitive sports at a high level to kind of take you into that young adulthood phase of training and everything. And so I learned a ton from rowing. I had some amazing coaches that were really influential in the rowing community. Learned a ton from them. Basically started coaching from the get-go in rowing. From sitting in the boat, I was always talking. You're not supposed to talk when you row, but I'm always telling guys what to do. So I got the nickname Coach when I was actually rowing. And so that was kind of funny. It just happened. And so anyways, rowing definitely, taught me a lot about training, taught me a lot about discipline, like I mentioned, but for sure was, the kind of the kickoff point for me with, all the sports that I was introduced to after that through all the people that I met rowing and stuff. So really cool. And you know what, being in the ocean in canoes, being in the ocean now and stand-up paddling it's just the same experience, just in a different way, a different board. You're not on a boat. And so it's just been really cool, just taking everything I know and learned throughout the years and now just on this pillar in the paddling. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Nice. Excellent. Well, Ben, similar to Mike, you've been paddling, sailing, surfing, and involved with a whole heck of a lot of water sports for some time. I think since in 2002, you kind of got into teaching water sports. Tell us how that landed you on your 2 feet, because you were kind of sitting down a good portion of the time too.
Definitely. Again, kind of along the same lines as Mike. I was paddling and surfing as a kid, and like all around Appalachia, the Outer Banks, Eastern Shore, the area around here, around Chesapeake Bay. There's a lot of different opportunities for lots of different water sports. So, fell in love with that really early on, and then became, I guess, a kayak instructor first as far as professionally. Enjoyed whitewater kayaking and teaching that, and really just loved the aspect of teaching the sport, the activity, and watching people get those aha moments. And so after teaching kayaking for the ACA curriculum for about 10 years, started doing teaching paddleboarding in, I think it was like 2011 or so, was when I first started teaching that, after kind of combining canoeing, kayaking, and surfing, and realizing you can do those things on river waves as well as in the ocean.
Nice. Ben and I go way back. He was on the Big Sup athlete team as well. So I had the pleasure of going down the James River for my very first time on a Class 3. It was a little bit of a Hail Mary moment. It was amazing. And I can't wait to get out there and do it again. And Anthony, I know you have a strong windsurfing background, snowboarding, surfing in general. Tell us about how you kind of landed on stand-up paddleboarding.
Yeah, to keep it short, I mean, my family, I grew up they've had a sporting good business. That was the family business, more of a mom and pop shop, like a lot of the specialty stores that are out there. And that was largely focused throughout like the 48 years that they've been in business. My dad still runs it, but it was largely focused on ski and snowboard as the staple. But summer sports, many things come and go. So, we were on a family vacation, I think in 80 or 81, and windsurfing was kind of coming onto the scene, at least around where we were, and took some lessons. And then we decided we would incorporate that into the family business to bring windsurfing in as one of the summer sports. And, we kind of all, there's really no one around teaching where we were at the time. So we kind of learned the hard way and learned self-rescue and things like that. How to get back to the beach when the wind blows offshore until you learn to tack and jive appropriately. And so then a couple of years later, we started teaching ourselves, and that led into the competitive scene, where I did a lot of the amateur races when I was a kid, and did a lot of the youth championships, USYRU, which is now US Sailing. And those are great programs where you'd have laser 2, and windsurfing in there, and you'd have Olympic coaches in there coaching as a kid for these youth championships. So Did that, and then eventually graduated, when I was 18 or 19, and got my PWA card. It was PBA at the time, before they changed it, and for the pro windsurfing tour, and I did some of the U.S. and the Caribbean components of that tour. I worked as a rep for the after racing, when I realized it was on the downside, difficult to make money. Worked as a tech rep and then a rep, and then eventually kind of went back towards the snow side of things and started the retail store, snowboard, skate, and sold that. And then an opportunity came up to work for a company called Neil Pride Limited that owned a brand called Flow Snowboarding. So I ran Flow Snowboarding worldwide for 15 years. But interesting, in that time, Neil Pride is known as the leading sail manufacturer for windsurfing in the world. And Sabrina Kites was the leading kiteboard and kite maker at the time. And they also owned JP Australia, another premium brand, and then there was Flow. So while I was working for them over the years, of course, it was natural as stand-up paddleboarding was coming onto the scene to, as part of the exploratory team, to look at that as to whether we should create or buy a brand. And, no one really knew what stand-up paddleboarding was going. So we took a couple of years to look at that market. And then I was on Maui around 2011 and talking to shapers and some other people about different opportunities. And there was a guy that was was a pro that, as a young grommet, I looked up to. He was from the East Coast where I was from, Scotty Trudone. And we just happened to be hanging out. And then before I left one day, he's like, "Oh, did you talk to Mark Rapphorst from SIC?" And I said, "Oh, those boards are beautiful." Like, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Oh, let me call him," because Mark was one of the pioneers of SUP, and Scotty was one of his earliest team riders, also pioneer from a rider point of view. So Scotty calls him up, and he comes zinging down from Highly Miley Road and meets me in downtown Paia. We have a coffee, hit it off, and then continue that dialogue, for a year, really, before we actually were able to come to terms and make sure it was a good fit. And then actually Flow Sports, which is the company I was running for Flow Snowboarding, we decided to acquire that brand and brought that into our portfolio. So that really unlocked the potential that Mark had felt that the brand SIC had, because he was making custom boards and shipping around the world, but he knew on a mass production level it would be more accessible, and that's what we did. But we didn't want to start something from scratch that didn't have all of the history, the heritage, the blood, sweat, and tears that Mark put into the brand, and really carved out a niche in channel crossing boards, which once we came together, it's the flatwater race and SUP surf. So it's been a great journey. I mean, of course, in the beginning, when I was on that exploratory team to get into SUP, I went out there and tried it, and it got its hooks into me just like everybody else back probably around 2010, 2011. So I loved the sport. So, was highly motivated to find a brand that we could fit into the portfolio so I could have more toys in the warehouse. And it's been an amazing journey, and very proud of where SIC has come from and where it's gotten to, and happy to say that Mark is still very much an integral part of the brand, designing and shaping and developing it. And I think he's a very proud papa of this brand and where it has come from, and also where we've taken it. So that's where we are today.
Excellent. Now, segueing into youth paddling, just a couple, some statistics here. The average age of paddleboarders right now is 35 to 45. And essentially, we're an aging sport. And youth paddling now has become very important to the growth and future. Anthony, I know you've experienced a similar trend like this in windsurfing, and how it kind of, that lack of focus on youth paddling, how it kind of took down windsurfing a bit. Tell us about that and how we can kind of prevent going down this road.
Yeah, windsurfing and other sports, but I'll talk specifically about windsurfing, have, when a sport is new, it's like the gold rush, right? And so there's all this innovation and pioneering going on, and people trying to push the envelope of performance, which also often pushes up price because you're using higher end materials, and that drives up the cost when you're adding more and more carbon, making things lighter. And so the unfortunate thing is, while we're focusing on ourselves and our own, addiction and how do I get faster or lighter or go bigger, or we end up leaving sometimes the kids behind. And that's a very dangerous place to be. Windsurfing did that. We got very high tech with things evolving at a very rapid rate, and people very polarized on performance, and they were not focused on backfilling that with youth paddling, so that we're farming the future generations at the same time that we're chasing kind of our performance aspirations. And like any industry, you have a ramp up through kind of the early adopters and, without being the technically correct term, the gold rush period, to where an industry hits its maturity. And then depending on, how well they have done to contemplate and foresee how to perpetuate growth, often it's the downward curve after that, or at least a plateau. I think for windsurfing, they eventually did realize that they needed to make product that were price accessible and also that were youth centric, but it was very late on the backside of that downward curve. Fortunately for paddleboarding, many of the companies actually come from some sort of a windsurfing background, even more than surf, so they've lived through that. And I think people are kind of aware and almost instinctively making sure that we're making youth stuff. And then other companies are being more proactive, realizing that we have to do that. So SIC, we created the RS 12.6 by 20 and 22, working in conjunction with the Paddle Academy, Mike specifically, and the youth on there, to have youth-specific product for the high-end or up-and-coming elite athlete. But we also then built, we tried an FX11 that was very low price point, durable, a little heavy. We tried and have the RS11 inflatable, which is great because of its durability, and the kids can roll it up and the family can pack it all into the car. And I think as our goal was not to corner the youth market, but more so to stimulate other brands to make also investment into product, from high end to price accessible products with the right geometry for kids. And I'm happy to say that I think that's going on. That said, there isn't like a movement per se where cohesively or, all of us have gotten together at the table and said, yes, this has to be the initiative. But if you look at the future of paddling and the future of stand-up paddling possibly being in the Olympics in 2028, kids that are 6, 7, 8 years old today are likely going to be, granted, we are a sport there, we're mature athletes, and mental toughness and muscular endurance, you might have a big span from 15-year-old kids to these phenoms that we see to 35, 40-year-old people for their country that are also bringing this whole thing together. And that is also the beauty of the sport. Not many sports you can do with your kids, whether it be competing or just going out and have a recreational time, or even, kids that are 5, 6 and people that are 76, 80, that can be paddling as a whole family, multiple generations. So I think it's super important that we continue the efforts that we have made as a industry, and maybe even amplify that further by, reminding
Absolutely.
people that if we don't invest in the youth, we will also have the backside of that curve, which isn't pretty.
Well, fortunately for us, we have Mike and Ben who are creating the great youth programs out there. Ben, you have a really interesting youth program with the Trinity High School whitewater paddling team. I think this started in 2013. Tell us about this and how it got started, and the mission of your program, and where it's going to go from there.
Sure, definitely. So the program actually started with my business partner, Mike Stratton, who I think he started the kayaking portion of it. Just we have this resource, the James River, right here in the middle of the city. So you can kind of compare it to living on the beach somewhere else. But sorry about the traffic.
The beach, which is better than no traffic with COVID,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we have this resource that we can paddle. You know, in general, it's been the domain of, you know, like canoeing, kayaking, rafting, that kind of thing traditionally. But yeah, he started this program in 2010, I think it was 2009 or 2010 when he started teaching at Trinity, and then it was specifically for kayaking because that's kind of what we were all into at the time. We came up in the same peer group kayaking, running as big waterfalls as you can run, and he found at a certain point, I guess around 2012 or so, that there was the program was interesting to more kids than could, you know, level up to that high level of being able to roll, to be able to access, you know, class 4, class 5, bigger whitewater. And he actually approached me about, because I'd started teaching, developing a commercial paddleboarding program here in Richmond for an outfitter. That he approached me to connect with the kids that weren't, you know, getting to the point where they could roll, but still wanted to paddle whitewater. And coming from that background of, you know, canoeing, kayaking mixture, I was looking at paddleboarding as a way to be able to get out to waves in the middle of the river and then surf when I wanted to, but at the same time be able to paddle like a canoe when I needed to, you know, get downstream through big whitewater and just kneel down. And so the idea of something that's easily to climb back on, and be, you know, be effective in moving around the river, versus if you know, come out of your kayaks and your kayak's full of water and it's a, you know, it's kind of like a real basic rescue situation, but you are having to stop the whole flow of what you're doing for the day. That appealed to the program, to Stratton and the high school program, to be able to get everybody, you know, moving at the same speed down the river. And very quickly we found that kind of the board sport vibe became very popular with the kids, and paddleboarding all of a sudden, instead of having, you know, 10 kayakers and 4 paddleboarders in the first semester, it went to like, you know, 10 kayakers and like 30 people trying to paddleboard down this section of whitewater that we teach on. And so we use that as a template to go into some other schools. We've have a good program at Collegiate, another high school here. We've worked with some supplementary programs that fund non-sport but activity programs at other schools, trying to work into public schools. And with the YMCA, the National Park System, the James River Park System here in Richmond, they're great folks to work with. But being able to offer youth programming in a way that you can get on the river and have a platform that you don't have to be able to like empty out of water every time. So, you know, your canoe's not subbed out, your kayak's not full of water, and you can just climb back on and keep paddling. So it's a little bit different take on the whole sport, but it seems to work really well. And we found the people, both adults and youth, but specifically these programs are taking off a lot, the kids programs.
Awesome. Ben, is your program, do you get credits? Do
kids
get credit?
So starting with Trinity, they get PE credit for that. And that's kind of how that works with Collegiate also. And then there are some programs that we've worked with in town that aren't specifically for credit, and they get run a little bit differently. But the idea is just to make, again, this resource. I mean, I guess the whole draw for all of the stuff we're talking about is water. But this resource of water we have in the middle of the city, be able to make it accessible to everyone. So some programs are, you know, multiple semesters of, you know, coming as a freshman, and by the time you're a senior, you're running harder and harder whitewater. And some programs are, you know, like someone's doing 2 weeks of paddling every summer and leveling up not quite as much, but still getting exposed to it and getting comfortable with you know, water sports in general, you know. Yeah, that does segue into during the semester, you know, we're offering, you can come in and paddle and get your PE credit for these specific schools, for the fall semester and then spring semester, and then we also offer summer camp versus kind of like junior guiding and teaching other kids, teaching your younger peers how to do it over the summer. So there's multiple different levels of what we're looking at. It just depends on what the buy-in is from the school or the organization that wants to connect with us.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, Mike, the Paddle Academy is recognized internationally for racing and your coaching. Tell us about your program, your mission with the program, and how it works with either public schools or outside organizations.
Yeah, real quick, like I'll just kind of segue off of something that Ben was mentioning in regards to the PE credits and the credits provided by schools. I think that's the common denominator here that we should all focus on with youth sports as it relates to connecting with school districts and that whole aspect of things. If you ever want to drive not necessarily business, but just creativity and offer alternative ways to access for exercise for youth in schools. And it all comes through the PE credit aspect of things. Like Ben was saying, we are able to get independent credits, independent PE status for kids who train at the Paddle Academy, because thankfully there's a ranking system that was put together at one point by SUP Racer, by APP, by WPA, and all these groups that are accredited. And so we're able to take those and that information and provide it to the school district to prove that, hey, these kids are putting together like some mighty effort year round here. So give them a little slack, give them independent PE credits so they can train harder, so they can get their schoolwork done, all that stuff. So anyways, just wanted to kind of, tag what Ben was saying on that, because that's super important. And I think that's like one way that we all have become unified with aspects of, youth and school sports and stuff like that. That's the scholastic aspect of things, right? The club aspect of things is a whole different deal. So with the Paddle Academy, about the same time Ben got going, we got going. I was, once again, I was, racing canoe, racing kayak, doing surski racing, all this stuff. And all of a sudden there was just this steady influx of my friends just disappearing one by one. Like, where'd my training partners go? Where are all my buddies going to race on the weekends? Like, what the hell's going on here? What are you guys doing? Like, wait, like I go by them, flying by them on my surski, and they're going the other way on a stand-up, and a group of like 20 people laughing and having fun. Where are you going? And I'm like, what? So eventually, at that time, I was coaching, helping a friend coach a canoe program locally at Dana Outrigger, and was heavily involved in the junior program at that time. And so I decided, you know what? In looking around at all my old friends that were paddling and kicking butt, and knowing I had like this just like super cool group of parents and kids that I was coaching in canoe, I reached out to a good friend that at that time had a SUP company called Riviera, and I got a bunch of equipment, and I donated my time to 10 kids, and I said, hey, you give me the equipment, I'll donate a year's of my time for free. And so if we did the math, it was probably about $100,000 worth of materials and time that we put into this thing. And so I donated all my time for a year. He gave me equipment. We loaned it back and forth. These kids were riding like 28 to 32-inch wide boards that weighed like 80 pounds with that were like 15 feet tall with diameter shafts like that, and like 10-inch wide blades, and they're like, okay, let's go do a racing start. They go running down to the beach, like the fins coming off halfway down because they dropped the board. And just stuff like that. It was hilarious. So that's how we started, actually. And then it was really weird because my whole goal, we have this racing series here in California, the SoCal Ocean Racing Series. And so my whole goal was like, I'm going to train these little suckers, man. We're going to like work out like a swim team, all these sports that I know that just are, super influential on me and youth sports at the time. And I knew when our first race was, right? It was like in spring. Or late winter, and so I had a few months to prepare them. And like Ben was saying, this is like 2012, something like that. And so started with 10 kids, and we showed up at the first race, and all these kids like Shay Fowdy and these like young adults now that are kicking butt racing, right? They're all like 12 years old, 13 years old, and they're they're chasing around like, Kristen Thomas and all these other like ladies that were like the pioneers of the SUP. And these ladies and these guys are just like, who are these kids? They're just like gnats, just like drafting them and stuff and making them mad and like, what? And eventually, exactly, hey, go away. We'd show up every week. It would just get a little faster, get a little faster, get a little faster. And then that's when I knew I was onto something. And at that time, after, we went through that season in summer, we did our first Battle of the Paddle, which was just phenomenal. And, after that summer, I sat down with, some people and, I just decided, this could be inclusive to just one board manufacturer. This was bigger because my whole, thought process always was like, treat this sport just like all the other, influential club sports that were taken off at that time that were, sucking kids into volleyball like my daughters were, and sucking kids into soccer and swim team and all this stuff. And let's give them an alternative because these are beach kids, right? Where I live, this is Dana Point. This was the hub. It is the hub, like where it all started at, Battle of the Paddle. And, I have this perfect bay, this perfect surf spot. And so we just started teaching them the skills that they needed to compete in the biggest race there is every year at that time in stand-up paddling, Battle of the Paddle and PPG. And so we just honed in on what we needed to do. And we just got some killer results right away, and kids were having a blast, and parents were stoked, and that's how we all got going. It was just kind of snowballed from there.
Awesome, excellent. This kind of segues into our team sports versus outdoor adventure sports talk, and a lot of folks don't know this about me, but I have a personal training background, and my early career started off in sports performance. And I was training crew kids, hockey kids, lacrosse kids, basketball kids. And I saw a lot of kids come and go pretty quickly because they'd go all in to a sport and double down with club sports on top of it. The burnout rate was really high. And at the same time, my daughter, at a young age, came to me and asked me, because she saw me paddleboarding, she's like, Mom, is paddleboarding a team sport? And she really had this idea of what a team sport had to look like ingrained in her brain. It had to be soccer, it had to be football, it had to be lacrosse or whatever. It just didn't seem to translate with these kids that outdoor adventure sports could be a sport that they can pursue. So just some statistics out there right now. Out of 40 million kids that participate in organized sports, 70% will drop out by the age of 13. So, and that's from the National Alliance of Youth Sports, that information. So Ben and Mike, I want to know how you feel like paddleboarding is going to change this for some of these kids, whether that's directly related to your program or just generally speaking. Ben, what do you think about this, the dropout rate with team sports? And do you see paddleboarding changing this, or what's your thoughts?
I think it's a completely different frame of reference. I mean, it sounds a little bit cliche, but it is a lifestyle sport. Like we're at the high schools that we're in every semester. Since they're getting a sports credit, like they're choosing to play soccer or football or tennis or something versus going paddling. And the way we've talked about with the administrators there many times, and we've gotten a lot of support with that. You play football and you stand out in high school, you may play in college. What are you going to do after that? The chances of doing that professionally are zero pretty much. And so what we're doing is giving people and kids who will become adults an outlet that they can use for the rest of their life at some level, whether or not it's paddleboarding or taking it, like paddleboarding aggressively, or like taking their kids out or their grandkids out, and having them sit on the board and showing them the local lake. It doesn't have to be the river, it can be a bay, it doesn't have to be surfing. There's so many different options that a platform like that allows. And again, just bringing it back to like the whole idea that so many people connect with water in a way that is not, you don't find anywhere else. You don't find it on a grass field. And we find that the almost a decade into the programs we started building, kids coming back after college, and they're like, yeah, like I where would I play soccer now if I was if I'd gone through that NCAA Division II, and then what am I doing now? I'm not playing for the MLS, but they come back to Richmond and come paddleboarding with us, and they know how to do it. And they've learned the skills and can continue doing that for the rest of their life. And so yeah, it's the longevity of it is just on a completely different level than the longevity of other team sports.
Excellent. Mike, what's your thoughts with your programming, and how do you think this is changing it for youth?
Yeah, so, once again, I rely on my background of, all the different sports that I've participated in. And I've been fortunate enough, like I said, on the onset to, be involved with, the most high-end, levels of sport in paddling and rowing and stuff like that. And then the club aspect of things, which is, canoe, right? Our canoe clubs, are spread out throughout the world. And there's this huge ohana that, comes with being part of a club. It's a family, it's a community, it's a lifestyle. And so people come from all walks of life, people come from all disciplines of water sports, and guess what? They're all drawn together because of the love of the ocean and the water, right? And so the whole premise around, training and, everything that has to do with, the Paddle Academy is based on, just accepting what comes your way every single day on the water, right? And taking that power of the ocean and wherever you're at on the water that day, and turning that into just like, complete relief of everything that these kids have been doing. So it's a lifestyle, like Ben said. And so that teaches them, and we try to, set that up and put it in motion as a microcosm of life, right? So kids will come down, pissed off, mad at mom and dad, burned out from school, hungry. I mean, you're a parent, right? They got kids. And so they'll come down, with a frown on their face, and they'll leave with a smile, giggling and laughing, and not wanting to leave their buddy in the parking lot, and their parents begging them to get in the car and go. And so that's a successful day on the water for me, outside of the competitive aspect of it, okay? And so that's what it all boils down to for us, is that, putting that feeling together. But it also, it's great for confidence, right? And so, and fear, overcoming fear and anxiety and all this stuff that, we've learned to, adapt to when we're training and preparing for races and competing. And so it's amazing what it does and how it transforms kids. When you've been with kids like Ben and I have for long enough, some kids upwards of 7 years, like Tyler Basher or Jade Housen or Shay Fowdy or someone like that, and Erica Benitez and people like this that I've been with, through their all other young lives, and you just see their confidence grow. I mean, the greatest story I have for a kid like Tyler is, like, Tyler was afraid to paddle out of the harbor, okay, in Dana Point. He would like start like hyperventilating and getting anxiety as we got closer to the harbor entrance. Well, guess what Tyler did last year? He did the Red Bull heavy water race. Okay.
Wow.
That shows you what 7 years of instilling confidence in the kid does for them. He's going to carry that on in life. Okay. He's going to be successful because of that. So it's not just the competition, but trust me, the competition and results, they do get in the way sometime, I have to admit, from a coaching perspective for me, as well as, parents and kids. And so it's really easy to put too much pressure on a young adult, as well as we know as an adult, And so you can tell when it's happening immediately. And so the biggest takeaway for us is just, through consistency in sports like this, you learn a lot about life. And that's the number one thing I learned when I started rowing. I was a young man when I started, and I left confident. And so everything that I learned from rowing, which instilled confidence in me through work and hard work and going through the, just showing up every day. And then the paddling and the canoe ohana that I learned through the Hawaiian, aspect of a canoe club and how it's put together. That's why we do things like we do at Paddle Academy. Like we bless our boards before they go in the water, before they open, just like we do with canoes and stuff. So it kind of pulls it all together, and you don't get that in club volleyball. I had two older daughters that played club volleyball. You don't get that in soccer, unfortunately, and other sports. And so somehow we need to pull it all together as a youth, type movement, like Anthony said, there's not a movement yet. And there's an easy solution. There's programs that have been done that have created it. And so hopefully we can, help inspire others to keep doing what they're doing like we do,
Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Well, they're deep. Deep. I grew up as an athlete, obviously, and then I had a snowboarding shop, and we sponsored kids through that, and then ran for 15 years, which we had a team icon on the youth development team. As you know, Casi, we actually took a lot of that that we learned through flow snowboarding and brought that into SIC. And that, of course, you're looking for some pinnacle athletes, whether it be adults or youth. But in our letters that we send to kids that get on the youth development team, it says, it doesn't matter if you become the greatest paddler in the world. We want to build confidence. We want to build strength of character. And we want to make you a better person in life, and maybe a small fraction of them go on to be Tyler or Jade Housen or Shea Fowley or Martin Beatree or whatever, as they, go into their late teens and into adults. But that's, this is part of our social outreach, that we're getting something out of the sport. We have to give something back, and we're giving something back to a generation, because when you go out there and you learn to fail, and brush yourself off and reset those goals, and as Mike said, find the confidence within, whether it be all of us have dealt with that, pushing yourself beyond the limit, going beyond the mouth of the harbor, right? Or getting back on that board when you lost. These are lessons that few things teach you like an individual sport. And stand-up paddleboarding is an amazing sport to do that. So I think it's a beautiful community. There's a big breadth, in terms of age of people that they're being mentored, whether it be from the parent or coach or the community. They're learning to go out there and have a great time. They're learning to fail and stand back up again. They're getting the taste of victory on their lips and knowing what it feels like when you perform in life. And I think we can build better humans, in general for that. And we've watched kids go from, broken families that were struggling.
My sister always wants to be perfect. And she says,
Cue the kid.
that I want to be the best, but she wants to be the best. And we don't know how to work it out. And my sister, it's not fair.
This is classic. Perfect timing.
Cue the kid. You can't cue a 7-year-old like that.
Wants to be messy.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what?
Well, Anthony is talking about this. Another statistic to segue us into a conversation here. 3.5 million children under the age of 14 need treatment for sports injuries, with nearly half of all sports injuries in the middle and high school student age caused by repetitive motion. Now, we all know paddleboarding is repetitive motion. There is also a safety aspect, right, with paddleboarding. I'm sure, Ben, you have interesting safety needs you have to address. But how are you guys tackling this with your programs? Mike, you have ocean, and you have training, and Ben, you're a little bit different. You have safety concerns, and you're not as competitive. Your program's not as competitive as Mike. So Mike, how are you guys tackling injuries and training in general, and the safety factor of being on the water? Because I'm sure a lot of parents who've never stood on a board before see the kids going out in waves and wind and whatnot. How's that? How are you handling all this?
I've had some pretty strange looks on the beach, that's for sure, from parents, looking at me like, you're going to take my kid out there? He doesn't know how to, so obviously they have to swim, right? Ben can kind of confer with that, I'm sure. Got to be swimmers. There's different ways of, doing, safety checks on kids and stuff like that. I usually try to work with them one-on-one and see their level of just basic, grasp of the ocean and everything like that. We study the ocean, we study the harbor, we know tides, we know wind direction, where we're at. It's all locally. When we go to a new spot, it's really cool because we get to learn, like when we go to Hawaii and race, or we go to Carolina and race, or we go to Oregon and race. we get to learn a new condition of wind. We get to learn a new ocean. And so they're in tune with that here, and they learn the principles of that before we go there. And then we follow the basic rules that we're prescribed to follow as paddleboarders, right? We always have PFDs. We wear leashes in certain conditions, not always. If we're in the harbor doing certain activities, leashes are a burden for us. And so, but we primarily always have a leash required, a PFD, and then obviously supervision, and we all watch out for each other. When we go on a downwind run that we have locally here, it's 10 miles. We stay in line. I mean, there's certain rules and protocols that I impose on the kids, right, for safety. And then we have the safety, protocols that we have to follow. But injury standpoint, it's real simple for me. The equipment is key, right? So the equipment is key. Big equipment doesn't work for little kids. Big equipment does not work for small-bodied people. Stiff paddle shafts, large paddles don't work for small-bodied people. So we have to, and luckily have been able to work with brands like SIC and other brands now throughout the years to really instill confidence in brands that, hey, these boards are good. And that's why you see boards really so narrow now and so much less volume, is because we finally learned that the board has to meet the body. Repetitive motion exercise is a bear. When you deal with endurance sports like the type of training that I do, you have to kind of overcome those. And the number one way to overcome those is proper technique and use of the body, right? And you know this from being a trainer, I'm sure. It's no different if you're in the gym lifting weights and you're doing something wrong with the range of with how you're doing a deadlift or a squat. If you're doing squats and deadlifts with crappy technique, guess what? You're eventually going to hurt yourself, right? If you're paddling over and over, taking thousands and thousands and thousands of strokes a week, with proper technique, you're going to be pretty fine. Otherwise, you're not. We've luckily, knocked on wood, haven't had too many. We never had really a horrible catastrophic injury where someone's blown out a shoulder or anything like that. But we've had some chronic injury, or I should say, fatigue in certain areas. And what I have learned for sure is that to not overtrain. We train 3 days a week on the water. As kids get older, I start writing programs that are pretty much elite level programs for them as they get strong enough. And then the other thing that I've learned is that as kids get in better shape and as kids grow older and they get stronger, once they reach puberty, then they're set to go, right? And they can start ramping up a little bit, around the age of 14 or so. But one thing I've learned is that as kids get better and get more efficient with technique and get faster at paddling, guess what? As they get stronger and faster and better, they're more prone to injury because they're more high risk taking now, right? So they're able to push themselves, they're able to challenge themselves, they're able to paddle harder. So you really got to watch out for it. First sign of anything starting to nag someone, shut it down a bit and see what's going on. But that's about it. Lots of stretching on their own. Things that are therapeutic on their own. We don't have the time to do that necessarily at the Paddle Academy because we meet for an hour or two, 3 days a week. So obviously we can't get into rehab and all that stuff and things, but we teach them, the importance of stretching, the importance of, staying limber on your own. If you have something that's going on, get in the jacuzzi, use some ice. So just the basics there for sure.
Ben, how about you? Your program, I can imagine, parents, their kids must go home to their parents and say, I'm going down class 2 and 3 whitewater. How does that fly? Like, how does the safety work for you? And how do you deal with injuries? And how do you keep your kids safe? And
Definitely, it's a very multifaceted question for us. I think that just to knock out a big chunk of it. If you check out the ACA, the American Canoe Association's whitewater, just basic safety, it's on their website. It's really easy to look through and kind of get ideas. We teach that every day. I mean, we're anytime you're paddling, we're out there, working as a group to start off with, and learning the skills and paddling on a section of water that incrementally steps up. So you're not having to teach these more advanced safety techniques like the first day. You're working on smaller stuff, and as the kids as a group start to build into that, then you can move to the next thing. But the whole thing is teaching it incrementally. That's safety as well as skill stuff. But yeah, we could spend the entire podcast talking about like whitewater safety. I don't really want to go into that. But yeah, check out. I wish I had written down the website, but yeah, it's American Canoe Association. You can Google it. But yeah, I guess like kind of to speak to some of the points, I think one big difference between the way the directions of Mike's program and our program is we're more competitive by choice. Just getting out there and paddling every day in rapids. Each one of those rapids is a chance to feel a success. You know, the difference between like at first like not understanding it and just being led through and getting to the bottom, being like, wow, I made it, versus like kneeling and getting it cleanly, making eddies. You know, paddling into the flat water, being able to stop, look around, just like you would on say a ski hill. Pull into the side of it and like I'm in control. I can finish this next section and stop there, and I'm in control. And then finally, you know, like standing up and finishing an entire. We call it cleaning the rapid. You know, when you clean the rapid, it's that you've done it standing, and that's in some senses it's like a small way of winning a competition. You know, that feeling of success in your head. You get to do that every day, multiple times. You know, challenge yourself. See what you can do, see what the next step is. So that's one way of looking at it. We do offer some competitions that we put on, and then we encourage the kids to go to different local and national competitions when they're ready. But it's mainly just like stepping up through that, and that's not part of the program that's really pushed hard. It's more of the experiential part that's pushed. But yeah, cross training, that's a big thing for us. You know, like if someone's been paddleboarding a whole bunch and they want to take a day sitting, you know, like put them in a kayak and sit on top kayak and paddle down through it for the day. When someone's been, you know, if they have like a ear infection from being upside down in a pool practicing their roll for a long time, you're like, look, you don't want to be upside down in the river, you know, while you're not feeling well, then get on a paddleboard and paddle that today for one of the kayakers. But we switching it back and forth all the time. Also, you know, we'll use different sections of the river. Some sections are good for moving downriver and practicing those skills, and then some days we'll go to one place on the river and surf. You know, and that's everything from surfing a kayak sitting down to surfing a paddleboard standing up with a paddle to surfing inflatable and hard surfboards, swimming in prone and then popping up like you would on ocean wave. And so just utilizing, like, again, as many aspects of water sport as we can to cross train well and for both safety as well as just like fulfilling, you know, like filling up the entire experience of being on the water. You know, give them every single thing to choose from. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the question. I don't know if I missed something or not, but I think that was
absolutely. And which kind of brings us to our last topic for the evening is gear. I know, Mike, right where you're going, hopefully for SIC gear is the RS. Tell us about gear choice, the sizes of boards that your students are generally riding, and yeah.
Well, you know, in general, I would say everybody's their toes have touched a 12.6. Okay, and I'm a proponent of the 12.6 for youth paddling for sure, and even smaller for the younger ages. Like my son Oliver, who's 6, you know, he rides a 12.6 just because you know, he's capable of doing that just for fun right now. But there's 11-foot inflatables that we've used that are super fun, little RS, you know, stuff. But yeah, so gear, equipment, you know, the kids right now over the last year we're kind of it was a real bummer because there was this huge push by athletes, I think more than anything, to rush the competitive aspect of things into the 14-foot realm of boards and kind of standardize that, right? And so not only was that challenging for smaller-bodied male athletes, also female athletes that were professionals struggled with it, and then the whole youth aspect that for those that were now coming up and challenging in the pro ranks as a youth paddler were kind of screwed, right? They were all 12.6s. They had to have 2 boards. They didn't know what to do. They weren't big enough. And so now we're transferring into 14-foot boards a lot sooner than I would want to typically, but because the kids get fast enough to race their peers, I allow them to and encourage them to race equipment that's equal, right? And so that's the challenge now. So they have to race on 14-foot gear to race a woman who they want to beat that they know they can be ranked further in front of. But yet I think going into equipment, it's going to be super important to talk about equipment and new sports and really, really, really focusing on a smaller board length for the kids and keeping it that way until they're 18 years old. And hey, if they want to go off on their own when they're 15 or 16 and start racing on 14s because they're strong enough to do so, like Anthony mentioned, there'll be just a small percentage of kids that are able to do that. Then hey, albeit, go for it. You don't want to hold those people back. But for the most part, a 12.6 or under is such an easy board to handle. You can carry it, you can put it in the garage, everything like that. Paddles is really, really, really important. That's your tool, right? And so paddle shaft diameter, stiffness, blade size. You have to have a variety of stuff for children to use. Adjustable paddles are huge, The first person that makes the most functional, high-end, killer adjustable paddle, I swear I'll like kiss their shoes. It's just like, it still hasn't been done yet. There's some manufacturers that are great manufacturers of paddles out there, and to have a really nice paddle that's adjustable, that gets a parent through a couple years of paddling, is huge. Some kids grow faster, some don't, right? You learn this as you go, but an adjustable paddle, these paddles are, on the market, at $300, $400, $500, right? You can't just go buy a new paddle every 6 months when your kid hits a growth spurt when they're 12 years old, It just, the look of, parents are just like, there's no adjustable, it's like, so good adjustable paddles, paddles that are light, paddles that work good, boards that are light, easy to carry. If we want to start kids out younger in these sports, like on the river when it's safe enough for Ben, or in the ocean, getting in and out through the surf with me, kids need to be able to carry these boards on their own, right? Literally, I could have 20 kids paddling, stand-up paddle boards, and going in and out of the water that are 6 years old, like the age of my son, or 7 years old. But guess what? They can't carry their boards even to the beach, And so we need these little pencils that kids can run around with on the beach and hop on, because their little hips are this wide, their shoulders are this wide, and their arms are that long, And so they need boards that are in scale to that. And so we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. So equipment is everything. Sizing is the key. Knowing the ability, knowing what they want to do. And then, we'll talk price and entering into this sport and stuff like that at a different time. But that's my spiel.
Ben, I know your requirements are way different on the river. Tell us your board choice and some of the pieces of equipment, or the way you've chosen to take these kids downriver.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess to start off with, it's all for us. It's durability, because we're paddling in a venue that is not only are the rocks there to be avoided at first, they are eventually encouraged. Watching the kayakers and the canoers that they're paddling with, you utilize the rocks kind of like a skate park, and so you're bumping off of them to make certain moves. And so I know, completely different point of view. So yeah, we're into one of the reasons that I connected with Vic so early, years and years ago, is the Tough Tech material you guys make, and that SIC makes now. That Tough Tech is just kills it for us. It's the density of it, and the foam with the HDPE wrap, just makes it so you can paddle down the river the way that you want to, and not have to worry about repairing your board every day. And so yeah, we start off depending on size wise, we'll start off the kids on either a 10-foot or an 11-foot towel fit. until they are, ready to take on the surf shape, towel surf, and then go from there. And if they want to stay and paddle the fit that's more stable and wider, then that's awesome. That gets them down rapids. And then when they want to get a little more aggressive and start moving into being able to surf things like throughout rapids, then that towel surf really does the trick. For most kids, we're usually looking at the 10-6 for the towel surf. And then some, the bigger folks like me, I'll paddle the 11-6. But yeah, just the whole quiver of the Tough Tech stuff works well for us. And something that really blows a lot of other paddleboarders' minds is we don't use fins. I've seen so many jaws drop in the last decade when I say that. But like, we paddle it. Think of it like a snowboard. You're using the edge to carve. The density of the Tough Tech allows you to actually use the side of the board to move through the water and carve across the river like you need to. But yeah, we don't put fins in for because you can use the edge of boards, and also because fins connect with rocks and throw you before the rest of the board does. So you can make much more technical, much more challenging moves without a fin in once you learn how to use the board like that. But yes, it's a completely different style of paddleboarding. Again, something we could talk about another time for a very long time.
Yeah, indeed. And I have to say, it was the craziest experience I've ever had. Just getting on a board like it's a plank, but learning to control that was amazing. It probably did me more justice, and furthered my paddling skills quicker than anything else I've done. So, kudos to you for doing that for your kids, because I bet they're very great paddlers. With that said, Anthony, I'm going to allow you to wrap up with gear and where you think that SIC is going with gear in the future, or any last thoughts about gear.
Yeah, I mean, for one, it's pretty simple. Make gear that is suitable for kids, both so they have fun. Fun leads to having them continue in the sport. If they don't have fun, they're done. So then there's a component about injury, as Mike has talked about. If it's not the proper geometry, weight, width, etc., then you're risking injuring. So we all need to, as an industry, commit to make the industry that is youth appropriate for those reasons, and also, the broad spectrum from like the cheapest board we can make to get a kid in on it, so a family can buy it, to kids that are going to be competitive by nature, because that's what kids do when they're young. They go to school, they compete academically, they compete athletically, and some are going to rise to an elite level and be our future stars. But more importantly than anything is, and I've done team sports my whole life, and I've done many, many, many individual sports, and nothing teaches you the self-confidence like an individual sport, where you have to look inwardly to achieve what you're trying to do, and when you get knocked down, you have all the support in the world, but if you don't find that strength within, you're not going to be able to rise up. So it teaches you to do that. And I was saying before, my kids still love me, that, we have had kids or parents do some of the youth programs where they've used hey, you're on the Flow Micron team, or you're on the SIC youth development team. SIC requires, certain things. You need to do well in school. You need to do an active kindness, and some charitable work and things like that. And we've had kids that were doing poorly in school, and the parents use that as a tool also, because they love it, to say, on the way home from the mountain, on the way home from the beach, that you got to do your homework, or working on that, on sight words or spelling or math or whatever. So there's a huge opportunity, and there's few sports like stand-up that you can do as a family and go out on a family outing, and so, if you want to have a better life with your wife, your kids, or, this is the sport where you can get out there to the beach and everyone can participate, and the kids can invite their friends. So I don't know. I know few, if any, sports, even surfing is, even though it's great, you can't just be like, hey kids, let's go out and get pounded by the waves and, almost get drowned. But you can go to like Baby Beach or some flatwater lake, and you can get all these kids in there splashing and having fun. And whether they stand up on their own knees at first, who cares? You're all out there together, you know. And Mike, you know, fortunately lives locally. My kids don't even know how lucky they are to have their best buddy Ollie, Mike's son, and us hanging out all together and go paddling and things like that. So they're fortunate, but anyone can do that, to just get the kids out there and go have an amazing time, you know, with adults, with the kids, with the friends and family. So I don't know, there's too many reasons to focus on the youth, aside from the business side. You know, if you build it, they will come. I'm not worried about selling boards. If we invest in the youth, we'll sell more boards. That's simple.
There's one thing, Casey, that I was going to say is that Paddle Academy is set up a little bit differently than, say, like an aquatic center program or a program like Ben's. Also, we don't furnish equipment. Okay, in order to be in the Paddle Academy, you buy your own paddle, you buy your own board. Okay, you get your safety gear, you put all that together. I let people come down and paddle for probably a couple weeks. I always have a couple spare boards that I keep for new paddlers, right? And but that's part of the thing that I find unique for me and what I've done is that if the parents and the kids buy into the sport at a young age, then I know they're committed. You know, I know it's not now just, you know, for me, you know, it's a different program than like what Ben was saying and stuff. You know, it's more like the, you know, kind of like the swim team, you know, type deal where, like, you know, hey, you have to sign up. Okay, now we're in here for 6 months, you know, or whatever. And so what's been really cool is all the manufacturers, you know, one of the main things that I did, you know, early on, because I was a newcomer to this sport. I mean, I didn't know anybody. I knew not a single person in this sport when I started. And I needed equipment, and I knew that it was going to cost money. And so initially we were donated equipment that we gave back or had an option to buy. And now we've kind of followed that same principle, and I've created relationships with companies like your guys at SIC and all the other local manufacturers in California and others as well, so that we could get boards at basically cost almost, you know, for some of these kids that needed help and assistance getting going. And then once they bought in and bought that board at that price, then they could sell it, you know, and each year get up to a different board if they took care of their gear and everything. And then they just kept moving along. And then also that created brand loyalty too. And it gave them this, you know, this connection with the manufacturer and the people like yourself. Like when you know, went to, you know, Hood River, you met all these Groms that you never met before. SICs, right? You know, and so that's a different thing. It's a different way of doing it. Some people do it that way, quasi, but just wanted to mention that, and that it's super important for the manufacturers to be involved in this process for the youth paddling. It's huge because it's not an easy price point for some people who think and look at this as just a lifestyle sport, right? And going and having fun and paddling over in Baby Beach in the harbor for a while. You know, it's a commitment of, you know, $1,500 or whatever it is, you know, and without ever trying something or knowing a sport too well, like most of them don't, that's a pretty big commitment. I don't know if you know, give $1,500 to your son to go try something you don't know a thing about, you know.
So true, so true. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for this edition of SIC Talk Story. I am pretty proud to be a part of SIC because of their investment in the youth. And I'm hoping folks out there will see your stories and maybe inspire them to start their own youth paddling programs in their local area. I know it really varies from coast to coast. I'm in New England, and there's not a lot of youth paddling in New England. There's some more so in the North Carolina area and whatnot. So this is a truly interesting topic, and I'm hoping this will kind of help further the cause a little bit. And we appreciate all of you guys being here tonight, chatting with us. And thank you. And once again, cheers, gentlemen. Have a great evening.
Disappeared.
Where I put it, lost it.
There you go. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
And have a great evening.
Photo bombing.